So IEMs have drastically improved in the last 10 years. We've seen new implementation with the MEMS, better implemented drivers, and overall better tuning. As a community, we are eating pretty good right now. Which got me thinking, if you bought a highly acclaimed IEM or very popular IEM 5 years ago, does it still hold up in 2026? And can we expect the IEMs we buy in 2026 to hold up in the next 5 years as well? So we're going to compare some IEMs that came out 5 years ago to see if they hold up in terms of value, performance, as well as tuning in 2026. Starting off, let's go with the single DDs first. We got the Katos, the Starfields, the Araya, the Corks, the OG non-DSP version. And when those first came out 5 years ago, they were claimed to be value bangers. I've seen a lot of people recommending them, but looking back at it now, they do not stack up at all. Basically, the $100, $200 price range from the Katos, the Starfields, are now pretty much replaced by single DDs for around $30, like the clean or dual DDs like the Allure Ultras. You even got some KZ single DDs like the Zenith that does a very great job, a better job than the Starfields, the Katos, the Raya in performance and tuning as well. In terms of both performance, value, and sound, I would say the single DDs for the most part are outdated. And fasting forwards towards 2030, I actually don't think like single DDs now, like the cleans, the Zenith, dual DDs like the Lua Ultras for around 30-40, I don't think they're gonna drop off too much. That's my prediction, because tuning wise, I don't think you can improve like that much because it's subjective by itself. Like as long as you fix the wonkiness and like the sharpness when it comes to the treble, the overall refinement is good enough for around $20-$30. I don't think they're gonna be like super bad in value. I do think maybe they're gonna be replaced by $20, maybe $15 IEMs, but even then the drop off isn't as drastic as the Starfields or the Kato, for example, which are $200 IEMs being replaced by $20 and like $35-$40 IEMs, right? So there is going to be a slight drop off, but overall I think if you buy the cleans, the Allure Ultra, the Zenith, or any single DDs that are pretty well tuned in 2026, I think it's going to be pretty safe overall for the next while. Now obviously there are some horrendous single DDs that age very bad, like the Tin Hi-Fi T2s. Listening to it now, it just sounds very bright, the timbre is very off, very sharp, just very unnatural sounding, and it's not even that technical. That is definitely a stinker. I actually don't think the newer KZs are gonna age that bad, because tuning wise, actually pretty like well done. It's not too peaky, it's balanced, it's an all-rounder. It's not gonna be like too offensive like the older KZ stuff that is literally a roller coaster when it comes to the treble. Super peaky, super sharp, timbre, the BAs weren't well implemented, right? And you got fake drivers in there as well. Nowadays, KZ, for the most part, has fixed the fake driver issue. Now, QC wise, I would say they're still kind of iffy, right? Sometimes you just get a broken cable, broken 2-pin when it comes in new, right? So that issue isn't going to change too much, because they're going to have to put a lot of R&D and basically money into the just making the QC better, and that hurts the profit. And then they will increase the price, which hurts their business model, so there's no point for them to do it unless they have like a more premium brand. If KZ can somehow get their QC to be just as good as the other, Sci-Fi brands, but for a fraction of the cost, I think that's where they're gonna just like skyrocket and pretty much take over, because in terms of performance value, driver, whatever, it's pretty similar to the other $50 stuff, but they sell it for a lot cheaper, right? So that is something to watch out for. And then you got some other budget kings like the Truthier Hola, you got the Sony MH755s, you can't get them anymore, but those do still age pretty good even now. Like if you can get them for like $20, they're still competitive with the True 2, with the new Waners. Maybe the build accessories might not be as good as the Waner 2s, but like overall sound wise, again, it's not a huge change like when it comes to the budget stuff, which is very promising for the budget IEMs, the single DDs, assuming that they do last for 5 years, which I highly doubt. If they do last, I think they're still going to be fairly competitive. And while we're on the topic of a single driver, we have the single planars, of course, the OGs, the 7Hz Timeless, and the original S12s. Those two do still hold up performance wise in 2026, and they're not overly expensive, or like the price difference isn't huge compared to the newer planars. For example, you got the Australis, you got the S12 Ultras, the 2024 version, right? Those are all hovering around like $150, $200. The only area that is really quote-unquote outdated is the timbre and the tuning of the older planars. They just feel a little bit overly bright, you know, shouty sometimes. The timbre obviously sizzly, it's got, you know, that planar timbre. Like if you compare the original S12s to the S12 2024, the S12 Ultras, the main difference is the treble refinement, the smoothness, and they removed that like peaky, like shouty, overly artificial timbre. When it comes to performance, again, I don't think it's gonna change much. I think the only real region that's gonna change moving forward is the pricing and the value that you're gonna get. For example, we already have the RD T10s, so maybe we can expect like a better tuned version of the T10s for like maybe around the same price or cheaper, like $35. Then after those, we got the Blessing 2 Dusk and the Hexas, which are hybrids. Now, I think hybrids have made a pretty big improvement when it comes to overall value. Like the Sonus, for example, pretty much came out a little bit after those, and performance-wise, value-wise, they are very good for a, you know, dual hybrid setup. And then you got the Hexas, of course, obviously being a value champ, even still holding up in 2026, which is pretty surprising because they actually went backwards with the Pure. They made the tuning easier on your ears, you know, more, I guess, musical, warmer, whatever you want to call it. But because of that, the overall technicalities took a hit. So I guess the next step after those would be a combination of both performance and tonality at the same time for like under $100. For example, you got Defiant as a pretty good hybrid, I would say overall, you know, QC aside and the retunes aside. You also have a lot of offerings from 100 to 200 with all the ZGAT, QER stuff, right? You got the Dunu stuff, 200-ish. The Blessing 2 Dusk, I would say, is outdated, replaced by a lot of stuff like the Astros. You know, you got the ZGAT stuff, you got the Dunu stuff. And I think the trend moving forward is just like trickle it down because there's nothing much to really improve upon aside from just the value department. Maybe the accessories, you know, you get like a crazy unboxing experience for under $100. Like for example, if you have something like the Astros, the Crescent, the 142s, even the Quadrids like the Supermix 4, you got the Tribrids like the Daybreaks, you're gonna be chilling for like at least the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think there's gonna be like a huge difference in performance and sound quality at around the same price range that's gonna come out in 2 to 3 years. You know, you're essentially trading off opportunity cost now and waiting for something that's potentially a little bit cheaper in the future, which I don't think is really worth it. Moving on, as for the collabs, this is where things get tricky because currently there has been a lot of like retunes just coming out with different colorways. For example, you got the Defiant stuff, the Nebula, I think, the Fiesta, and then the Defiant Gaming. You know, you got the Chorus, right? They don't, even the Rumbas from ZGAT, like they don't add much, right? They just kind of retune it, repackage it, and then hopefully people buy it as like a collector's item or whatever. I am kind of scared for collabs because it might just get oversaturated without much new innovation, because it's actually pretty cost effective for the brand or the company to do it. They just, you know, get a new colorway, they retune it a bit. They don't have to go back to the drawing board and make something completely different. They can just copy and paste it and keep the cycle going essentially. Like the original point of a collab was to take something that was very popular, maybe a bit expensive, and scale it up, you know, put the price down so everybody had more accessibility to it, or maybe make something more unique, something more personalized to the, you know, influencer, the YouTuber's own taste, and people want to try that. But I don't think just repeating and then retuning the same shit over and over again is gonna be, you know, any benefit to the community or to the, you know, brand or to the reviewer or whoever is collabing with the brand, right? So that is something we should definitely keep an eye out for. Hopefully we don't go into the late stage of sci-fi capitalism, which would be really bad. Then lastly, we got some mid-fi and endgame IEMs like the older Campfire Andromedas 2020s. You got the Empire Ears stuff like the Odins, you know, the Valkyries. Fun fact, actually not fun fact, sad fact, Empire Ears I think are out of business or bankrupt. They closed down or something like that. That's pretty unfortunate. I guess I saw it coming because they're pretty overpriced, but yeah, that's unfortunate. And then we have the 64 audio E12Ts. You know, you got the Elysian Annihilator 2021 version. Starting with the mid-fi stuff like the SA6, the variations from Moondrop, the S8s, right? All three of those are actually still fairly competitive. You can get them for like a very good price. The variations obviously very good for a EQ IEM. I would say that's one of the few Moondrop IEMs that actually aged very well. For example, the new Meteors are a worse value version. That is a step backwards for Moondrop. Similarly, I would also say the Brain Damage is a step backwards in the overall tuning than the SA6. Now, performance-wise, I'm not going to argue the SA6 is better because it's not. The Brain Dance is very technical, but it's just that the timbre is overly artificial, it's bright, and then you got the thinness and a shrill kind of sound once you crank it up. So if they tuned it better, I think it would have aged better down the line, which, you know, they still have the chance. And then as for the SA6, obviously a lot of people still like it. You can't get it anymore. You can get the Mark IIs, you can get the SA6 ESTs, but you know, they share a similar sound. Performance wise, not a huge difference. It's just that value wise for 6BAs in a big, you know, 2.6 for like 600 is kind of high. I would say maybe 400 is pretty solid price. It's just price wise for a multi-BA IEMs. I do believe we're gonna see like more, I guess, quantity for a cheaper price. Value wise, I think it's gonna trickle down, and then we're gonna see better drivers for cheaper. But yeah, mid-fi has been very competitive with the hybrids, the TRIBRIDS, like the Top Pros, the T Pro SCs. You got the, you know, ESTs with the Volaires, right? You got the Rockies, all fantastic value for around $500. I doubt they're gonna get any cheaper than that. Maybe like a 2 EST, 1 DD, 1 BA set for like $350-400, but you know, you're trading off opportunity cost enjoyment now for something maybe like 20% cheaper 1 or 2 years down the line. That's up to you, right? But value wise, overall for TRIBRIDS, hybrids, it's gonna be very hard to kind of squeeze out the profit margin. If you have any of the value bangers right now, like the High 4 Mark IIs, like the Rockies, right, like the Volaires, I think you're gonna be chilling for the next like 3 years at least minimum. I don't think there's gonna be like a huge, you know, increase in value or a huge drop when it comes to the pricing. Then lastly, for our older endgame IEMs like the Annihilator, the Z1Rs, the 12Ts, they still hold up very well in 2026. I wouldn't say they are a value pick by any means, but if we're talking about performance, I think they're still top tier. You know, subjectively, tonal wise, you can say, oh, I don't like the 12Ts, I don't like these Z1Rs, whatever, you know, that's to your own personal preference. But when it comes to overall technicalities, like the 12Ts are still around the same as the Cat 12s, like the newer stuff, like the Prestige stuff, the V16s. So if you bought those like what, 5 years ago, you are like chilling. I think those are a pretty solid investment. And moving forward, this is where I think things get a bit trickier. The main trend moving forward is not making a even more technical, more expensive IEM, because the diminishing returns are absolutely like astronomical when it comes to that. Like there are new driver combination like the Hexa IEM, 6 different drivers, very cool, but mostly a marketing gimmick. Like I've heard it, not a huge difference versus like even the $2,000 stuff, and that's like upcharging you like crazy. So when it comes to the high end, companies want to make a flagship that they can make a lot of profit, which is why value wise there's not going to be a huge jump in my opinion, because for example the Annihilator 2021 versus the 2026 version, it's basically the same IEM. And similarly, U12Ts, Kineza 12, you know, Valhallas, same price, same performance. Like we're not expecting a value bump when it comes to the high end. You can expect maybe like more, you know, drivers added in, you know, more different combinations, the newer IEM drivers, the MEMS, maybe they can implement that. So if you bought an endgame in 2026, like you bought the Valhallas or the new 2026 Annihilator, for example, I don't think you have to be worried about like a new endgame coming out like next year that's going to be noticeably better than your current IEM, right? I think the only area you would watch out for is value, because I do believe we're going to the trend where someone takes like a higher price, highly acclaimed endgame like the Storm, for example, and they make a cheaper and more budget friendly version of that IEM, like 90% similar for, I don't know, like a fraction of the price. I think that's going to be more popular just because of the economy. I do think that's going to be the next trend, and personally I'm going to try to do that with my own collabs, make something accessible for more people, take a higher, you know, highly acclaimed sound, make it my own, and then make it just like cheaper for everyone. But yeah, I hope this Yap session was helpful, informative, or maybe at least entertaining while you're eating or you're driving, whatever you're doing. I don't know what you're doing, but yeah, I mean, let me know what your thoughts are on the current state of the sci-fi economy. Let me know what you think the next trend is, and I will see everyone in the next video. Thanks for watching.
Shout out to Mr. Dom Q, Zenu, Birak, Walker Standard, User, Tsukasa, Guava Juice Spain, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, CT Jack, Henry Claudia, Cinema Horse, 777ZK, Obi, PM the Wizard, Treble Extended, Mad Herc, TR8107, Shem Bakley, Addy672, Michael G, Trackstar, Raphael, Ori73, Juniper, Ryan, Effin Nadim, Chimika, Raj, Javier, Gelblog, Ocean, BC Knight, AK131, MN Gelato, Unbalanced, Vitor Ken, Hakase, JRX, Samuel, John Simon, Archie, Brandon Fish, The Audio, Sir Eisen, JPLA, Blue Nerd, ATGBB, Virto, Geranium, Spinner, Sam Z, Raj, Your Boy Banana, Etune, Grizzly, Leanne, Scaffrog, Mark M. My name is Jeff, Francis, it's Mark, Hedgehogs, Another, and Kuya Josh. Thank you guys so much for the support.